Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast. And RJ, today we're going to be talking about some special teams because I think that's a place where the Kraken could, maybe up their game a little bit and maybe flip some of these 1-goal, 2-goal results that they've been having lately on the few games that they've been losing.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty big area of the game, especially in close games. So I'm looking forward to the deep dive on that one. I know you've done some research and we've looked at some things and have some interesting takeaways.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be fun. We'll talk generally how the team is doing as well. The great goaltending that they've been receiving from Joey Daccord. Kind of the update on the Shane Wright situation as much as we have. And then obviously the big Jordan Eberly news that came out this week. But of course, first we got to start by talking about the wonderful Queen Anne Beer Hall, RJ.
That's right. So yesterday was another NFL Sunday, and it's getting to some really exciting times in the NFL season. And it was rocking for the Seahawks game. Big win against the Arizona Cardinals, divisional opponent. And as the Seahawks go down the stretch, if you're not there at Lumen Field, being the 12th man cheering on the boys, Queen Anne Beer Hall is the place to be. They've got these NFL Sunday specials that you can take advantage of. It's just a great place to go watch a football game, not just a hockey game.
That's true. And I know, what a better place to watch, say, I don't know, performances like the Seahawks, of course, but also, I don't know, some guy like Saquon Barkley have the most rushing yards in a game since 2009, RJ. Might be a nice place to watch that with, I don't know, a buddy at a place like Queen Anne Beer Hall, where you can just, after every 70-yard touchdown, just turn to him and be like, wow, life is great, isn't it?
Yep, that sounds like something that you would say. I knew you'd find a way to bring up your star fantasy player after his performance this week.
It's a nice life having him and Derrick Henry this year. Not gonna lie.
Glad I'm not playing against you this week.
That is true. All right, so the biggest news, arguably, that came out this week, RJ, was that around Jordan Eberly, the Seattle Kraken's captain, and we finally have kind of an update on the mysterious but significant injury that we know he suffered last week.
And given the way the team was talking about it, we kind of knew it was going to be bad, especially the longer it went without an update. I think we went almost a week before any real update from the team. And yes, unfortunately, it's as bad as we feared. The team announced that Eberly underwent successful surgery on his pelvis, which that sounds pretty nasty. And his expected recovery timeline is at least 3 months. So that would go until at least late February. And the fact that it's worded at least 3 months too tells me it might be longer than that. Even when there's sometimes when there's longer term injuries, teams will use approximately, or they'll give kind of a general return date, but you don't often see the at least. And so Eberly is going to be out very long term.
Yeah, we were starting to get that idea. That's pretty long, right? You're talking about then at that point, say, misses December, January, February, March, maybe, for a return date for Jordan Eberly. That's not a lot of season left, about a month and a half left at that point. It is unfortunate. Can't say I've ever heard of a pelvic injury before like this with a hockey player either. So it just goes to show how dangerous those situations are where they lose their footing, they go down hard into the boards. You just kind of never know what can end up happening there. It's always bad though, it seems like.
Yeah, it's very dangerous. I hold my breath every time I see somebody going to the boards like that with speed in a game. It's just sometimes you get up and walk away and you're fine, but other times something like this can happen where, as Dan Bilesma said about it earlier, right? It's just a major traumatic crash, and that's what happens to you. So wishing Jordan Eberly the absolute best in his recovery. That's going to be really tough for him, I'm sure, especially with how good of a start to the season he was having.
Yeah.
You just hate to see it for a guy like that who really stepped up after getting the C on his chest. And so, unfortunately, the Kraken are going to be without their captain for a while, and that's going to have some real big impacts on the team. I think we should go into what that's going to be.
Right. So we were hoping that he would be back and he could slot in either back up on the top line or potentially be there with, I don't know, RJ, Shane Wright, and play on Shane Wright's wing. And we know the chemistry that the two of them have had. Shane Wright's played his best hockey at the NHL level with Jordan Eberly out there. With Jordan Eberly out, that doesn't become a situation for Shane Wright, RJ, but it also means that, Jared McCann's not going to have his running mate on the other side of the ice there either. I mean, kind of what we're seeing right now with the team feels like what the reality is going to have to be, unless the Kraken make a move and somehow bring somebody in. But I don't know that they're really in a position to do that.
No, not exactly. I think it would take a lot, and also from a cap perspective, which we can get to later. But I think the biggest impact is that he was the solution. Jordan Eberly was when we were talking about what to do with Shane Wright. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to Shane himself, but that seemed like the easy solution of who to put him with to get that confidence back. It's just not in the cards anymore. And so that's going to be a problem. And yeah, I think it does take something away from this first line. Andre Burakovsky looked good there for a couple games being in Eberly's spot, but as we saw, against LA, and he's not going to be able to do consistently what Jordan Eberly did. He's going to have his flash, he's going to have some good moments, but it is a downgrade on that line. And so it takes something away from your top end, and it takes something away from the forward depth too when we're looking at maybe line mates for Shane Wright that can play with him.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, putting aside Shane Wright for a second, just looking at the rest of it, it means that you're going to need guys like Berkey to become more consistent. And I brought up the idea after that LA game that, Berkey, it felt like the last road trip was also when like the most serious questions about him were kind of coming out. Has his first disappointing game on that line on their first road game. Maybe Berkey is just kind of an at-home player. But you need more from, I mean, already you kind of needed more from everybody from a scoring perspective, but now you really need more. You're going to need like an Ellie Tolvanen to be able to start finding the back of the net more consistently. And Oliver Bjorkstrand, who was second on your team in goals last season, he's going to need to start finding the net more consistently. You bring in Daniel Sprong. If you're going to put up with the abysmal defense that he adds to your lineup, especially after that Kings game. That is insane, that Kempe goal and what he's doing on that drives me crazy. But you know what? If you got to play somebody on the wing now, right? And you need goals, and that is what you brought in Daniel Sprong to do. You need him to step up and start adding in production. It just means the situation is that much more dire for all of your secondary pieces to start contributing. And so far, we haven't totally seen that.
No, the way the Kraken are built, you need a certain number of those secondary pieces because, right, they don't have a star player. You have a bunch of secondary guys, and you need a certain number of them firing at any given time in order to make everything work. Jordan Eberly was one of those guys, especially early this season. He was one of those guys who was going and kind of driving the bus. You need it to be other people now. Question for you, Dylan, though. I'm wondering about this too because he is the captain. And from a leadership perspective, I know he's going to be around the team, certainly when they're at home, right?
Mhm.
But it's not really going to be the same as having that leader on the ice in the room. And especially, look, I haven't seen him around since that happened, right? I imagine after a pelvis surgery, you're probably going to want to be at home resting, maybe not walking around a ton right away. Does this create a bit of a leadership void as well?
I mean, I don't know. It's tough to say without being in the room, as we've talked about in the past. I would hope that it in some ways doesn't, just because he was just named captain this year. You have a ton of people who have worn A's with this group for a while now that were kind of a collective leadership group just as recently as 2 months ago. So I would hope that they're able to kind of step up. You need a Yanni Gord to step up. This is the opportunity for Maddie, who was awarded an A this season, to step up leadership wise. You've got Adam Larson on the back end holding things down, but I would hope that it doesn't mean that there's an issue for them there. And certainly the rest of the homestand didn't look like there was.
No, that didn't seem like there was a change there. Brandon Montour, another guy who
Yep.
I still think, quietly just holding things down as well from that standpoint. So I don't think that'll be a huge deal, but I do wonder as the season goes on, as we get to especially maybe like long road trips, through December and everything, where I can't imagine Eberly would be a part of that going on it. I wonder if his presence will be missed.
Yeah.
And then did you have anything else before I get to kind of the one
Yep.
silver lining, which is the cap implication?
I was just gonna say, no, talk about the cap.
So the one silver lining of this injury, and it is bad, but one thing it does do is it gives the Kraken more cap flexibility that I still think it's wild that they have, because we've told you on this podcast, I've told you in the Armchair GM streams, they're going to have to move somebody out. The clock is ticking. They're going to need to make a move. And I guess the little caveat that I gave you at the start of the season was, well, unless somebody is just constantly injured long term. And guess what? Somebody has pretty much constantly been injured long term for the Kraken this
Mhm.
year. It's not something you ever want to plan for or deal with, but it's been the reality. So all that talk about needing to move a Yanni Gord or a Brandon Tanev or somebody like that as soon as Vince Dunn comes back, you don't really have to do that anymore. You're actually okay once Vince Dunn comes back. You've got a little bit of a cushion. You can have up to a 23-man roster, and that move is delayed.
Yeah, I mean it's nice in the sense that you're not right up against it. We're not having to look at a 20-man roster and kind of always sitting on the edge of our seats of if an injury happens, what is this team going to do and all of that kind of stuff. It's still though the fact that the injuries that did happen that have created this cap space for you have been Vince Dunn and now Jordan Eberly. The trade-off just does not feel worth it at all, right? Like it is nice that they have that. It gives them flexibility. If they did want to go out there and try to add somebody, they could because of this. But I still would think that this team would just be better with the two of them out there. It sounds like we get Vince Dunn back soonish, maybe around the end of the month there. That's going to be nice. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't take away that you still have a couple, guys that have been playing really well for you in Yanni Gord and Brandon Tanev coming up on the end of their contracts. They're going to be free agents at the end of this season. You're going to have to figure out that situation. I don't know. It is a silver lining in the sense that it gives you a little bit of flexibility, but it just feels like if that flexibility is just to bring up more guys that aren't really going to contribute the way Eberly was contributing, I don't know that that you take that. Do you think though that Ron Francis had some sort of crystal ball where he knew this was all going to happen, RJ? Because he was in the situation where he basically needed situations like this Vince Dunn injury or Jordan Eberly's injury to happen, and it ended up happening.
Well, if he had a crystal ball, I might have expected him to make some different moves than he's made over the last few years. So I don't think he had a crystal ball, but that is one thing as a GM that you can do is hold on, wait, and see if something like this does come up. And in the unfortunate instance where it does, you didn't have to move anybody out. Francis could have, I guess, tried to be proactive in a sense and maybe moved out a Gord or a Tanev right before the start of the season. But you know what? He didn't do that, and the team is actually better off for it.
Yeah, as we get a nice Fuji sighting there on the video version of the podcast over your shoulder. Look at, oh man, that's like picturesque. Just sitting there right there. That's great.
So handsome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this is I guess one of the instances where Ron being one of the more patient general managers kind of pays off for you, right? Because you just kind of wait until your hand was forced, and his hand is just not going to get forced at least until March. It looks like now. So we talked about earlier though how this affects Shane Wright just not having kind of his preferred running mate, it seems like, in Jordan Eberly. Shane Wright's now been scratched for 3 games in a row, RJ. I don't think you or I thought that was going to happen when we were talking the Shane Wright scratching last week. That was kind of like our big main topic. I expected him to be back in the lineup for the road trip here down to LA and then tonight in Anaheim. We haven't heard anything from morning skate yet because they kind of have a late morning skate today in Anaheim, but he was not out there against the LA Kings, RJ. Are we starting to maybe change our thought process of like, oh, okay, he'll sit out a game or two, get things right, and then he's going to come back in? Are we starting to get maybe a little bit more worried than maybe we already were just from him being scratched at all?
Right, I'm a little bit more worried. I'll really hit the panic button if he's scratched tonight because I cannot think of a reason to possibly do that. 4 games is way too much, and it's really messing with his development to miss that kind of time. But I'll leave it till after morning skate when we see if he's in the lineup or not, which maybe we should figure that out by the time we're done recording this. But I'm worried a little bit. And the reason I'm worried is because it seems like there might be an effort here to shelter Shane Wright from good opponents. And I understand if you're trying to have a guy get his confidence back, it's going to help to play against an Anaheim or a San Jose rather than a New York or LA, where, as you know, those are 2-0 game, 2-1 game, right? You're not scoring very much anyway, and you don't want him to get his confidence down. So I see the logic behind it, but it also worries me a bit that Bilesma feels that that's, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it seems like he feels like that's necessary.
Yeah, and just how the age of Shane Wright and how much he's already been around an NHL team and the situations he's been in the AHL level, the fact that you would need to maybe do that is concerning. That's usually something, I think of like last season with Leo Carlson with the Ducks, right? We'll just stick in Anaheim there. And he comes over, they draft him, third overall, second overall, and comes in 18 years old, coming over from Sweden, and the Ducks are like, hey, we want you on the main roster. We want you around everybody. We think you can contribute this year, but we know it's a big adjustment. And so we're going to kind of cherry pick which games we dress you for. But it was something that was very much worked out with him, the player. It was worked out with his agent. His parents were involved. Like everybody was involved, and they said, okay, this is a really good plan, we feel like, for everybody, as this 18-year-old comes in and tries to join the NHL right away. It's a different situation here with Shane Wright if you're kind of going down that avenue where you're talking about somebody who is over 20, somebody who has been around at the NHL level. This was supposed to be the year he's supposed to stick at the NHL level. He's been in championship series at the AHL level playing against men and looked very good in those. I feel like that is a worrying situation if it does continue to become that. I'm with you. Like, hopefully he's in the lineup tonight and then he just kind of sticks in the lineup. I mean, it will be up to him because I think you can't afford to continue to scratch him at all, in my opinion. I talked about this last week, right? Like, this is the year to set him up for next year, which is going to be his kind of make or break year historically when looking at top prospects. I think if you work him back in the lineup for these games against Anaheim and San Jose, and moving forward, and you feel like you're back in a situation where the team might be better without him, or you're worried that he's not playing the way you want him to, I think at that point you have to send him down. You can't scratch him again, right? Like, you can do this once. This is a one-time move to scratch him for a handful of games and try to get his head right and get him back out there playing the way he was in the preseason and through training camp. You cannot do that again later in the season, right? Like, that message is just something you cannot send to him, and it's certainly one you can't send to the fan base. That it's unacceptable. So hopefully, though, fingers crossed, he just comes back in and he plays the way we know he can.
And I'm optimistic that he can, and especially if you are going to go with the strategy of, and again, I don't know that it's Bilesma's strategy here, but it sure looks like it. The strategy of trying to let him go against weaker opponents and get that confidence back. I think Shane Wright can do well and have that top six mindset and produce against Anaheim and San Jose. And the reason I think that is because he did it last year.
Yeah.
It seems like they kind of chose those games. And I imagine it wasn't just a Hackstall decision. It was probably an organizational decision to have Shane Wright come up or down, I guess, to SoCal for the call up against Anaheim, against San Jose. He did also play against LA, so there's that too. And maybe that's a little worrying that he didn't do it this time. But against Anaheim and San Jose, and he was able to produce against them. Even had a 2-goal game. I mean, he looked very good at times. And so I'm hoping the idea is to just have a similar type of reset where Dan has talked about Shane getting back to playing the way he played in training camp. And I would imagine getting back to the way he played during that call up last year, at least being against this similar team, right? Same spot. Maybe that'll help him.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully it does. I like that you bring up organizational because I do feel like this is more of an organizational issue than it is a Coach Dan Bilesma issue and a coaching staff thing and a decision there. Obviously, when you're dealing with a top prospect like this, it's, you would think that the front office might be a little involved with the decision to scratch him. Ultimately, it will be the head coach's responsibility. But I do feel like a lot of what we've seen from kind of Shane Wright, and really this kind of goes back to year one, has been the organization not really going all in on him the way that they probably should have, right? Year one, you have him on the roster as an 18-year-old. You don't have a coach that wants to work him in, really. You have a great fourth line that's going out there and producing for you in that second season for the Kraken. It created a rough situation. Okay, we made it through that moving forward. But this year, you knew that this was going to be Shane Wright's year to come up to the NHL level if you're Ron Francis and the rest of the front office, and you knew that he was going to need to be put in a position to succeed. And then you go out and you get a Chandler Stevenson and you sign him to a contract that says he's kind of got to play top 6 minutes, and you bring in a coach who is always going to put out the lineup that he feels gives him the best chance of winning each and every night. That's what any head coach is going to do. And you put them in a situation where now Shane Wright in his first season has to be put in the bottom six. And he has to be put in a situation where he's going to go out there and start developing habits of a grinder instead of a top offensive player. And at some point, I'm just like, make up your mind, front office. Like, do you want this guy to start developing, or do you want to try to make the playoffs? Because it doesn't feel like right now both of those things are possible given where the roster's at.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because it seems like that's the conflict that really they've had the last two of the last 3 years, because you were able to send him down to the AHL last year with Shane Wright, is that trade-off between having the best roster on a given night and trying to push for the playoffs versus prioritizing one of your top prospects' development. And it feels like the needle's always been on the side of the right now, compete for right now, try to make a playoff spot. I understand it a couple of years ago because Shane Wright is so young and there's still some time. And that was a playoff team. That's a 100-point team, right? But now it feels like, is it as worth it? Because now it's closer to that make or break time for Shane Wright. And the reason that you're having to prioritize the team doing well right now is because you're a playoff bubble team. And there's really no margin for error at this point, right? I mean, we talk about that all important Thanksgiving milestone. It's not the be all end all, of course, but if the Kraken are going to be in a playoff spot come Thanksgiving, they're going to need to win these next 2 games. Like, there is no way to be in a playoff spot in Thanksgiving if you lose these 2 in regulation, right? You can't drop them. And so they are kind of tight against that. And so that's the trade-off that they're making. But you look at the long-term, the long-term priorities of this organization. If Shane Wright doesn't turn out for you to be at least a productive top 6 guy, what are you doing?
Right. It matters.
Where does that leave you?
I know, but if you're like the general manager, you need to make the playoffs.
Well, that's if you're the GM, and you don't make
Like,
you don't make the playoffs this year. Where does that leave you?
Right. So it's one of those tough situations. We can move on though. Let's move on to happier things.
Yes. Sorry for all this early on, everybody.
I know we were trying to get it out of the way early. Yeah.
Goes on.
I know you want to talk about Joey Daccord. We've done some looking at some goaltenders, especially over on our Patreon podcast. We were looking at some goaltenders that have surprised to the upside. But especially after this LA Kings game, RJ, Joey Daccord needs to be talked about, and somehow you have the difficult task, RJ. You have to somehow properly explain just how good Joey Daccord has been.
I know, and as much as I insisted on putting this on the agenda because Joey Daccord needs to be talked about, I was struggling during the live commentary with everybody as Joey Daccord was in the middle of that great performance during the post-game live, as I had a little bit of time to think about it, to find a way to properly express this run of goaltending that we're seeing and just how good Joey Daccord has been. There's the numbers. I could throw the numbers at you. I could throw you the save percentage. I think a better stat would be goals saved above expected. That's my goalie stat of choice. I think it's the best thing we have that's really publicly and easily available. And it's just the amount of goals more a goalie has saved compared to what you would expect given the level of shot quality they faced. Joey Daccord, third. Well, Hellebuck played another game, so Joey Daccord down to third in the NHL in goals saved above expected. He saved over 13 more goals, more than he should have this year based on the shot quality he's faced in only 14 games. Yeah. That is essentially saving you an extra goal per game. And we've seen that in certain games like the LA one, it feels like multiple goals at times. So excellent run of play from Joey Daccord. And over the last 2 seasons, he is also third in the NHL. So now he's done this over, 64 games. This is not really a fluke anymore. It feels like it's Connor Hellebuck, Anthony Stolarz, and Joey Daccord as the top 3 guys. And when you're in the company of a Connor Hellebuck or someone like that, it's really impressive. And so those are the numbers. I don't want to throw too many numbers at you because they all start to kind of blend together at a certain point. But I think maybe the simpler way to look at it is just that Joey Daccord, every shot on which he has a chance, he is stopping. Yeah. And that is so valuable to her team. I think it's more valuable than even one of the top scorers going on a run. And you have a guy who's, putting up a point per game, right? this goaltending makes that much bigger of a difference. And it's the reason the Kraken have been able to stay in some of these games where really they haven't had any business staying in them. And I think it's important that we appreciate what we're seeing right now, because simply this is the best run of goaltending that the Kraken have ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I know that going with the franchise history thing, it's a shorter franchise history, but I still think this is really something special that we're looking at, and it deserves to be talked about.
It does. I mean, obviously, you mentioned it, right? The insane goals saved above expected numbers, the company that he's in over these last 2 seasons, and the consistency that it's shown now into a second season. Because I think that was something that a lot of people wanted to see was, okay, you were great last year. Can you do it again? That's always the question when you have a goaltender kind of come in and become a starter for the first time, is they have to go out there and they have to do it again. He's doing it again. And I think it's just some of the situations like this Kings game, especially. I've never seen a goalie stop a 2-on-0 like that before, right? Just
with that much time,
Byfield, just all day they have no other player is in frame. It's just them and Joey, and they just come in and he just stops it. Like, I've never seen that before.
And they got the shot off too. Normally, if you see a stop on a 2-on-0, right, it's because somebody kind of flubs it and they don't get the look that they want. They got the look that they wanted.
Right.
They make 3 passes back and forth. They get the shot, and Joey somehow gets it with the top of his stick because he doesn't go down. He doesn't commit, and just leans each way a little bit, forcing them. They really didn't have anything. I've never seen anything like that.
No, I haven't either. So that, I think, almost becomes like the way to talk about him, is that he's doing things that we've just never seen before. And like, that's impressive. That's generally a good thing, at least when we know it's a positive like this. The other thing is, boy, that contract extension with him sure looks pretty good right now. I know we've talked a lot about Ron Francis, but that was a good movie made.
Yes. I mean, look, I was critical of it at the time. I still look, as great as he's playing. Don't make me go into this.
Well, you don't have to, RJ. It's not that much in a world where the cap's probably going to be at 100 million in for the start of the 2027 season.
It's 5 years. I'm sorry. Look at the Vezina candidates from 3 years ago.
Connor Hellebuck was there. He's still there.
No, I was talking about 3 years ago. Grubauer, Fleury, and Vasilevsky.
Yeah, but anyway, older-ish.
Yeah, they're all older-ish, but this one does take them. Anyway, sorry. I never feel confident saying where any goalie's going to be in 5 years.
I know. I'm just saying the fact that the number is under 6.
It's reasonable.
Means that
Absolutely,
it's reasonable. You just said he's like the second best goaltender. What are we doing? Like, come on. All right. Honestly, I thought we were going to finally get RJ to agree that paying a goaltender is fine. I really thought we were going there. Sorry, everybody.
I didn't know that you were going to try and go there, but
I'm just saying, we're seeing all these other goaltending contracts.
I will say this,
especially this upcoming off season, and it's going to make Joey look like a steal when Ottinger gets 7 and Shesterkin gets 11 point something crazy or 12. It's going to make Joey look like a steal after he outplayed them for the first.
I will say this. Here's where I might have been wrong on that. I was thinking, okay, how much could the price really go up if they waited? How much would it really go up?
Yeah, it's huge.
The way he's playing right now, I'm actually starting to believe the price would have gone up quite a bit. You're talking in the 7 million range.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which I just didn't think. I'm like, oh, even if he, as a Vezina finalist, how good could he really be? I wasn't anticipating this.
Yeah, no, he's gonna be that good, RJ. Actually, no, Joey's playing out of his mind, and he is the reason that this team has been able to be in so many games. And they've needed him to play this good, RJ, because they've struggled to score. We knew that was going to be an issue for them this season. It has been an issue for them this season. And one of the big reasons why it feels like they can't score, RJ, is because they cannot develop a net front presence at all. They just will not go to the net front. This was an issue for them last season. We were hoping that a coaching change would maybe affect that, right? We were hoping that maybe it was just the offensive philosophy that Dave Haxtell and his coaching staff are running. I think we're over 20 games in, right? We've passed Dan Bilesma's 20 game mark. We're there. I think we can definitively say, no, this is more of a personnel issue than a coaching issue, because We know that Dan Bilesma understands the importance of going to the net front. His Coachella Valley Firebirds team certainly did, and they were able to produce a lot that way. I can't imagine he would then lose that when he came up to the NHL level. So it does appear that this is more of a personnel-based problem, RJ, and this is also where Jordan Eberly being out really compounds things. Not only was he producing for you, he was in part producing because he was willing to go to those dirty areas on the ice and try to score a greasy goal here or there and make the difference for his team. I just the last couple minutes of that Kings game, RJ, you're down by 1, you need a goal, and just nobody's in any position to score a goal.
And we were talking about it on the live commentary as well, right? I mean, as they're cycling around, staying at the perimeter, and this, I love this about the live commentary games because we have the chance to talk about it in real time with everybody as it's happening. We're like, who's at the net? Who's the net? Who's the net? There's just a giant gaping hole in front of the net. No Kraken players there. And then we see Ty Cartier start to go to the net front, right? Like, okay, good. Cartier's there. Finally, someone's working toward it. And he scoots up a little bit too. And then a few seconds later, you have the one goal that they did score. And it was in part because of Cartier's great screen on the goalie, where Riddick just couldn't even read where that puck was going. And so they get rewarded for it. That's what baffles me a little bit, is that the few times they do it, they do seem to get rewarded for it. It's not like you go there, you put in all this work and nothing good comes of it. They seem to get rewarded. It's just they don't do it consistently.
Yeah, and I've been trying to figure this out, right? Because it's a fundamental hockey thing. Like, go anywhere on this planet where they're playing ice hockey at 5-on-5. Maybe there's some like 3-on-3 Chell league somewhere where this wouldn't hold. But you go anywhere on this planet where they're playing 5-on-5 hockey that looks anything like what you see in the NHL level, and you know what you're gonna find? Successful teams going to these areas on the ice, right? Like, that's just, it is a fundamental that yeah, I mean, at least I was teaching at a peewee level. That's just one of those things you need to understand about the sport of hockey, is that you go to those places and you will score, right? You take shots from the perimeter if you want to, but then you need somebody there for the rebound opportunity to bang it home, or you need somebody there screening the goaltender, like the Ty Cartier goal, like a lot of goals that they've scored this season. You need somebody screening the goaltender so that he can't see the puck. Like, goaltenders are great, right? Like at this point, with the butterfly and the size of their pads and everything like that, it's hard to score on an NHL goaltender. Best way to do it, don't let them see anything. Like, it's not that hard. Like, it's one of those things that follows logic, and that's what makes it kind of interesting, is that this group just doesn't really do that. They don't have guys that consistently do it outside of Jaden Schwartz. I will say Jaden Schwartz, he is our net front hero, kind of consistently going there all the time. I'm trying to figure out, is it with the personnel, like, how much of it is that they're maybe not the biggest group, RJ? Because, we've seen, like, look at that game against the Kings, right? Look at the size of some of their forwards, right? They can go and they can battle an NHL defenseman and try to out leverage them and gain good body position in the net front. And then you look at this group, and I don't know, is Oliver Bjorkstrand supposed to go and do that? Good luck, right? So I do wonder, do you think some of this is just a size issue with this forward group, RJ?
I think some of it is that. I mean, guys like Bjorkstrand, yeah, he's going to get really beat up going to the net just because of his frame, right? And you don't have anybody that is really big and is a bruiser there, right? I mean,
there's no power forward.
No, there's no power forward. And the power forwards you do have who can go, like Ty Cartier was there the other night.
Yeah.
But they're bottom 6 guys.
Yeah.
They're not guys who are going to be at the top of your lineup in those situations all the time, ready to score. So that's the problem, is you don't have anybody in the top 6 really who can kind of get to the net and have that size. I think the size is part of it, but it's not all of it. You brought up our Pee Wee coaching days, and I don't want to call it a debate that we had, really just a difference in philosophies. And you were absolutely right at the Pee Wee level, because you would say you can coach the players, you can change their habits and their tendencies, you can coach this stuff into them. And I would, my philosophy was like, no, okay, they are who they are. Let's put them in the best position to succeed given what they already are, which in Pee Wee, bad idea. That's not the way to do it. You might get more wins there, but you're not going to develop players the way that Dylan did. I will give you that. But at the NHL level, I think there is something to be said for that. When you have players that are around 30 years old, I think there is an element of they are what they are. And it's something that maybe as a GM, when you're constructing a team, you ought to know and plan for. You look at the offseason acquisitions, Chandler Stevenson, he's never going to be that guy.
No.
He's a perimeter guy. He's a playmaker.
Mhm.
If you ask him to be a net front guy, he's not going to be very effective because it's just not who he is and what he does. And I think you have a team with a lot of guys like that, that if you do want to really change the habits, I think it's you have to bring in players who that is who they are. That is what they do, and that's what they've historically done.
Yeah, and that's going to be, again, it's there's no easy fix there then for the season, right? And like that becomes the rub, is this is so obviously like what the team needs, and we'll get into special teams in a sec too. But like these are two very fixable things. And this is what got us through so much of last year, was like, look, if the Kraken go to the net front more, go to the prime scoring areas a little bit more often, they'll score more goals, and that fixes things, because they were getting good goaltending from Joey last year, just like they were this year. And if they fix their special teams and you start scoring on the power play a little bit, you can start flipping a lot of these results, and you're a playoff team again, right? Like it seemed like the very easy kind of 2 steps you needed to take, and you're out of the situation that the Kraken find themselves back in this year. And it's kind of weird that they weren't quite able to fix it. I think about even like the offensive philosophy that they run isn't one that necessarily means this can't happen, because I know that could be another thing people could think about is, well, look, Dan has said numerous times, we've talked about it, we've broken it down. This is a team that wants to skate. They're going to focus on their breakouts, get the puck up the ice quick, try to go in, attack off the rush, especially with the 2 wingers, because the center usually is the one playing far back in the defensive zone. That's fine, because you know what? When you don't score on that opportunity, right? If you don't, obviously, ideally you do, but most of the time you're not going to. That's just the way it goes in hockey. One of those 2 wingers who is moving with speed should be then setting up net front. And it feels like a lot of what we see is that doesn't really happen. I know NHL defenses now more than ever are used to playing either a 3-2 zone kind of situation, or there's some teams that, after the Michigan started becoming a thing, have started to play something called the anchor. Not really many good teams are playing that. Nashville and Chicago are like the 2 teams that really do this, so take that for what you will. But teams are more aware than ever that you do need to keep defensemen close to home. And I think that has made it so that it's a lot harder to go to the net front than in years past. And it is something that you see. And they've also learned from teams like Pete DeBoer's Dallas Stars that, hey, if you've got wingers that can contribute defensively, instead of just kind of loosely being in the way of a defenseman, if you can have a winger come down to where a player has to go along the half boards to kind of cycle the puck, if you can just have them sit in that spot, they don't even really have to do anything, but they just shorten the cycle, it will really disrupt what an offense is doing. And so we're seeing that kind of night in, night out. We're seeing more and more teams do that at the NHL level, RJ. And I think this is a problem for a lot of teams, but it's definitely one for the Kraken, where if you're not going to have somebody net front or at least doing moving screens, it just playing from the perimeter is just not what it used to be. Because you can't cycle the way you used to and then look for somebody in the slot. You can't, you know what I mean? Like those looks just don't exist right now, the way defenses are playing. What you see is a lot of what the Kraken do. They cycle behind the net because that's the space that's available. Defenses have said, you know what? It's actually not that important, because guess what? It's pretty hard to score from below the goal line, right? Like, again, logic is playing out. I am curious, and again, I'm not putting this all on the Kraken to find a way around, to be the team that innovates offense for the new age. But it is one where I do feel like it becomes that much more important that you start throwing more pucks on net and you have guys there for screens and rebounds, because you're not going to be able to cycle the puck the way you're used to cycling the puck. And you're not going to be able to make those skill plays from the perimeter as easily, because defenses have just adjusted for that as the NHL has become more and more star driven.
And we saw it during training camp as it became clear the ways that this team wanted to score, that obviously off the rush with speed, we want to play with speed, we want to attack in transition. That was the number one way.
Yep.
But teams can take that away by playing back and by being conservative, right? And teams have taken that away. But the other way too, like you said, behind the net, and especially when you're behind the net or in the corners, throwing a puck out quickly to the slot,
Yeah.
and having somebody who's ready for it, expecting it, ready to go. We saw that a bunch at the start of the season. Remember,
Mm-hmm.
we'd see one of those, feels like every game that somebody would score that way, usually on the bottom six, right? With that Yanni Gord line, just throwing it in front. Somebody, there for the one timer, or Chandler Stevenson's been really good with that, throwing those pucks from behind the net. Jaden Schwartz has been getting there. But the problem is when you play against a team that is focused defensively, that's another thing that can be taken away. And you have to make it really quick and really perfect to get it to work and execute. Feels like it's been a while since we've seen one of those goals.
It has been a minute. And
the only ones we've seen are when Chandler Stevenson recently
Yes.
has thrown it in front. But those have been total defensive breakdowns by teams that are frankly not very good. And so it's not the kind of thing that we've seen them able to do against LA Kings, New York Rangers, some good teams. We haven't seen them being able to do that yet. But one thing that, like you said, it just works universally. It doesn't matter who you're playing against.
Right.
It's throwing those pucks to the net, getting guys there, and just using the chaos of hockey in your favor where nobody can defend. If you get a perfect bounce off a rebound or whatever, you can't defend against. It doesn't matter who you are.
Right. So I feel like that's something they need to do. And it does feel like they were getting to the net better for rebound opportunities earlier in the season. Right. And they weren't really rewarded with it. A lot of them just kind of bounced by them. But I remember feeling like I saw that from the press bridge a lot more than I saw it during this last homestand.
And I wonder if that changes a little bit more when they get Vince Dunn back in the lineup, because another reason I think you want to go with that strategy is because you have a guy like Brandon Montour, who is fantastic at putting really good shots, accurate shots, tippable shots to the net that can create those second opportunities. But then you'll also have a Vince Dunn, who he can also do that sort of thing. He likes throwing pucks in from the point. He likes doing that kind of stuff too. And I feel like if you have both of those guys in the lineup and you're not operating that way, it's really a waste.
Yeah, definitely. The other area that they can, hopefully score some more goals, RJ, is on the power play. And we talked during the last post game on the live game commentary, kind of, let everybody in on the conversations we've been having up on the press bridge. And when looking at this Kraken power play right now, don't entirely know what the end goal is as far as like what play are they looking for? What are they trying to set up? There is more player movement than there was last year that has benefited some guys more than others. Andrei Burakovsky looks a lot more comfortable on the power play this year than he did last year. I think some of the defensemen, like it's worked with a Brandon Montour, somebody who wants to be a little bit more of a roamer. I think that helps. But without something that you're kind of more obviously working towards or trying to do, I do wonder how successful this power play can be. And so I was trying to look into Coach Bob Woods, as we know, assistant coach Bob Woods and assistant coach Jess Campbell are the two in charge of the power play. We know what Jess Campbell is doing on the power play from Coachella Valley, and it was at times a struggle for them on the power play there, but a lot of it was, having guys there for screens, taking shots with like a Riker Evans from the point. Like that was a lot of what their power play was winning down low and in and around the crease. We already talked. Kraken, not great at that, right? Like that's what we were just talking about. So some of the stuff that Jess Campbell was doing might not translate to this team. So then it became looking at assistant coach Bob Woods and what has he done on power plays that he's run in the past. And obviously he's coached at many different levels. Hard to get tape from, say, a decade ago at like, the WHL level, the AHL level, anything like that. So I can't definitively say what he was running a decade ago in those leagues. And then at the NHL level, RJ, he has run the power play, it looks like once before. And that was under Dan Bylsma with the Buffalo Sabres. And that was his one instance of running the power play. But how does this sound, RJ? 24.46% on the power play that season for the Buffalo Sabres, which was first in the NHL. So
sounds great.
I know, not a lot of experience for Coach Bob Woods, but the experience that he does have at the NHL level looks pretty darn good. So I was like, that looks good. Let's try to see what about that was really working. And again, unfortunately, it's hard to find NHL tape from 8 years ago that's publicly available. So it is very hard to find what that is. You and I were watching some Jack Eichel all goals compilation from that season to see if we could glean something from the power play there. Not too much to glean. It's a lot of Jack Eichel looking like a star player in this league. A lot of just one-timers for Jack Eichel there. I don't step in if I'm leaving something out.
No, you're absolutely right. Like all the Jack Eichel power play goals pretty much were plays that you can't really expect any Kraken player to be able to make
Yeah.
from those spots.
Yeah. Unless you can get Jared McCann to have a one-timer on, and you flip sides
Flip
with
the ice.
him and kind of go for that. So I was trying to pull this stuff up and find something that we could like look at to give us an idea of how this power play in Buffalo played, and if there's anything that Kraken can kind of take from that, or if there's stuff that we're seeing that it can take a year for a special teams unit to come together. Maybe there's some like early looks that we might be seeing here. And so there was an article from Sound of Hockey, to give credit. It's one of Curtis's articles over there. Love us some Curtis. And he pulled up, it looks like from Michael Blake McCurdy, the Buffalo power play kind of heat map from that season. And care to guess where the vast majority of everything took place, RJ?
Excuse me. Wow. Okay, my voice just completely failed me there. In the around the bumper slot, maybe.
There was some stuff there in the bumper slot, but heavily around the net, right down low, kind of using your man advantage in and around the crease, because you could there's definitely heat maps from one area on the point and from the bumper spot, but you got to think, right, like those have maybe at best a 20% chance of going in, which means 4 out of 5 times, RJ, there's a rebound to be won. And so you want to be there for the rebound. I look at this and I say, it's, the NHL is played a little differently now than it was in 2006, 2017. But I look at it and I go, as we were just talking about, a lot of that would translate. Because if you do have a bunch of perimeter players on the power play and you just start taking shots and you're able to use your man advantage, particularly down low, I feel like you can win more often than not. However, I did just say like that should work in today's NHL. It will work a lot less in today's NHL because of what I talked about earlier. Teams are smarter about how they run defense now. They stay at home a lot more. It is not abnormal now to see from a penalty killing unit both defensemen very, very close to the crease. That was not the case as we were watching those Jack Eichel plays, right? Like that was not the case in the NHL a couple of years ago at all.
Yeah, no, we saw a few. Yeah, there was a lot more space around those areas of the net. And you'll see, I mean, we complained about it a lot in the last game with the Kraken PK shrinking down as low as they did. It would have taken away chances like that net front, where there's any rebounds. That's kind of the way the teams are playing it right now. Of course, you had a Quentin Byfield out to the side with that one-timer in much the same way that Jack Eichel was able to do the one-timer from the other side, right? It opens up other things, but it does take away the net front stuff.
It definitely takes away the net front stuff. So I don't know that you're going to be able to have a power play that scores at a near 25% clip anymore in today's NHL by having that. You can of course get your one free screener down low. NHL defenses on the penalty kill, they know just to let that guy through. It doesn't matter. As long as we're close to home, we can potentially take his stick away once the rebound opportunity is there, all of that kind of stuff. But I do think in general, it's better on the power play when you do have an extra player out there compared to the other team to be able to go to those areas and utilize that advantage. The other place to use it, though, is with the bumper spot, because that is the player who is playing in the most dangerous area on the ice, outside of around the crease, that is. And that is in the slot, RJ. And I was looking, and I went and I looked at Minnesota's power play last year, which Bob Woods was not in charge of. He was in charge of the penalty kill. So this is not to look at Bob Woods necessarily, but it was to look at what Bob Woods was around. Right, the other coaches, I'm sure that they talked about this stuff, all of that. And one of the things I found interesting, yes, they made their like crazy plays with Kirill Kaprizov, which were very similar to the Jack Eichel things, where when you have a star player who just has a one-timer like that, it's unstoppable. There is just no way around that. Especially when you have a Matt Zuccarello who can no-look pass to him very consistently and just diagonally cross the ice like that with a pass without ever looking at him. It's can't replicate it. Okay. But the other thing that I noticed was they were very creative, I thought, in how that they were using their bumper spot. And that is the player who does play in the slot in the middle of that 1-3-1. And what I thought was interesting was against a passive PK unit, the bumper would drop all the way down to basically net front. to provide a second layer of screening so they could get a double screen going and then kind of equalize things once a rebound chance was there. You had 2 players immediately there instead of just one. And because, like I said earlier, defenses now have 2 players there for those opportunities. So now you're at least on equal footing with the defense once there's a rebound. If they were against an aggressive penalty kill, though, RJ, the bumper would float way up, almost to kind of where the defenseman plays, and just be an open option for whichever player is getting pressured. So an aggressive penalty kill kind of chases the puck carrier back towards the corner, towards the blue line. That puck carrier now has the outlet of the bumper player, who has a ton of ice available to them in this scenario because of how aggressive that penalty killer was. And what would happen is that bumper player would take that puck and either be able to make a pass over to Kirill Kaprizov or take a shot from the slot. They would have it. They had time and space. They're able to walk in a little bit and take an extremely high percentage shot. And that's something that we have never seen from the Kraken under now 2 different power play coaches. Well, arguably 3 because you have 2 in charge of it this year. But that is something that I would love to see from the Kraken because it still feels like they continue to underutilize that bumper position. And so passive PK, you have them drop down low, be an extra attacker in the dirty areas. Aggressive PK, have them play up high, have them really become a shooting option and a pressure release valve for you, and maybe you can make something happen. That's at least what Bob Woods was around last season in Minnesota. And Minnesota had a 23 point something power play last season, a 22.7 power play percentage last season. It's just pretty good.
It is, and it's something that's relatively easy to implement, I would think. It's just one little tweak, right, of giving somebody an outlet, and it's not like they're using the bumper for a ton of other things anyway right now. So I wouldn't mind seeing it. I'm curious, Dylan, though, who would you go with in that spot? Because you need the ability to work from the high slot, get some shots off, have something dangerous there for when the PK is aggressive, but also be able to kind of outmuscle guys when the PK is conservative and be in the net front. I don't know if the Kraken have a whole lot of guys who can do both. The one I can think of potentially is maybe Shane Wright.
Shane Wright is definitely the first person I thought of because that is historically where he likes to play and what he wants to be doing there. So Shane Wright is one of them. Hate to say it, but Jordan Eberly, I feel like, could have been that guy too.
You're right,
but you don't have him as an option anymore. I do wonder about like an Ellie Tolvanen. Like Tolvanen has decent size to him, and we've seen that he's not afraid to throw his body around and stuff. It is not like anything he's ever played before, but he has the ability to put the puck in the net when given time and space. And like I said, he can hold his own in physical situations. So you could maybe try an Ellie Tolvanen. I would love to say Oliver Bjorkstrand because I just like how quick his hands are. I like his ability with time and space, his ability to score goals from the slot. I worry when he has to drop down low, what can he accomplish there? But you know what? On a power play situation, it might be different than 5-on-5. He might be able to do something there. Those, I think, are your best options. I think you want guys like Matty Beniers net front, or Jaden Schwartz. You want more historically net front. Jared McCann could kind of do anything and everything. I do feel like so far having him be in his spot on the power play hasn't led to too much. So maybe you move him around and you make him the guy that you try to get the puck to in good situations, because that's really, as I was looking around the league, RJ, what so many power plays have just turned into is you just get your best goal scorer the puck and let them have the time and space of, the other team being short a man, the opportunity to go out there and score. And I know he doesn't have the one-timer of a Kirill Kaprizov or a Jack Eichel, but putting him in a spot where maybe he can get open in the slot is an answer for you.
Yeah, I do think teams have tried to take him away, and they know that shot from his spot right on the left circle, right when he's able to skate in, they know how dangerous that is. And I think teams have done a good job taking that away this year. And I don't blame him, right? I mean, you look at where he's had all that success in previous years and the fact that he's the leading scorer, that'd be the first thing I'd look to take away. But that might mean you do have to move him around somewhat. One thing I'd be interested to maybe see if it could work
I hope you're going the same place I would go next.
Okay. Well, because you wanted Jared McCann on the right side for the one-timer.
Yeah.
And then you do have a player on the left side, Brandon Montour, who we've seen in like 4-on-3 situations can do that.
Uh-huh.
And if you're going to put somebody else up top, I'm curious who you would have up top, because there's some options. There's Vince Dunn when he comes back and
Yep.
load that up.
Yep.
There's maybe even a Riker Evans if you
Yep.
wanted to do that and make sure you have a defenseman there, or even like a Matty Beniers or a Chandler Stevenson, a center with vision. I don't know if I feel as good about that, but I'm curious. What were you thinking?
So I was thinking you run a 2 defenseman setup, but
Okay.
not like a historic 2 defenseman setup for a power play look, right? I'm with you on that. I think you put in that slot a Vince Dunn or realistically a Brandon Montour to be your bumper player. And then I think for that unit, you probably have Riker up top, and then you have Vince Dunn on your second power play unit in his normal spot. I think you do that. Maybe you load it up with Montour and Vince Dunn, and you just kind of, a minute 20 for that first unit power play and just let them cook. But I that's what I was thinking, is Brandon Montour is the other guy that I was hoping you were going to say, because that's who I would put in the bumper slot there for that, because he's got the size and the physicality to win down low. He understands things down low too. We see him generate great chances there. We saw it in the Kings game. And I think he also has the shot that he understands how to quick release and where to shoot from that area on the ice, kind of a high slot, because that's who he's always been as a defenseman. I think Brandon Montour is arguably your best option if you are going to go down this road, is to have him there. I don't hate the idea of having Matty up high. I love his tipping ability, and he's very good at screens, so I like him net front. But I don't hate Matty up high. Chandler Stevenson, just because his defense isn't the greatest, I don't know that I'd want him to potentially have to deal with like a 2-on-1, shorty opportunity. But Matty, you could definitely trust with something like that.
Yeah, no, I think Matty you could trust. It would be an interesting setup. I would love to see it. Now I'm going a little crazy here, and I was like, what about a 3 defenseman setup here? You've got, you have Dunn, Montour down there, and Alexiak net front.
You could do that. Like, I mean, why not, right? Like, at the very least, if you're going to have a second, like the bumper player play down low, or right, if you surround the perimeter with these defensemen, or even in a different look, right? If you want Matty to be the guy back, stick Alexiak out there to be net front, because he's going to outmuscle any defenseman that is there, and then it becomes like a one-on-one battle for whoever the bumper is down low, or something like that, or a player coming in from the half boards. I don't hate it. Like, again, you're in a position where you can basically try anything, because right now your power play is operating at 15.63%. There's not a lot of room for it to realistically go down. So you might as well kind of try some of this stuff and get creative.
Yeah, you know me, I'm a fan of getting creative on this stuff. I will say, I think if NHL teams had to have all defense, a power play made of entirely defensemen, if that was somehow a rule,
This is
Kraken
the
would
team.
have a top 3 power play in the league.
They would. So I don't hate the idea of going 2 defensemen, loading it up, just because Riker Evans, Vince Dunn, and Brandon Montour are probably 3 of your top 5 power play players. Probably should find a way to then have them out there on the ice. Maybe not all at once, all 3 of them. That might get a little crazy. But potentially having 2 of them. But I like the idea of doing that, but in a unique way, not just we have 2 defensemen kind of at the points, and we're trying to do the power play that way. I don't think that would work really at all. I think you need to get creative with how you deploy them. But yeah, right now there's only 3 teams worse than you on the power play: the Anaheim Ducks, the New York Islanders, and the Boston Bruins. Try stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Experiment, try stuff. There's only up you can go, I feel like.
Yes. On the flip side, RJ, the penalty kill is better. You're 18th in the league in the penalty kill, but again, we are seeing times where, particularly with the Chandler Stevenson, Brandon Tanev pairing up top as the 2 forwards on the penalty kill, that group is just way too passive. We saw them get, kind of caved in on that power play against the Kings, in a way that is very concerning for just a 5-on-4 power play. They were so passive, it looked like a 5-on-3 for the Kings. They were able to get Fiala is just able to put the puck right in Byfield's wheelhouse, because he knows he has all the time in the world to be able to make that pass and put it exactly where Byfield's going to need it. I would love to see that unit particularly get a little bit more aggressive. Just get sticks in lanes. Like, you don't even have to totally sell out your positioning. Just be a little bit more active with your stick. Make sure that you put yourself in a slightly better spot to take away passing lanes. I think that would help the penalty kill a lot, is just being just a hair bit more aggressive.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And we talked about it, I think, a few weeks ago. It feels like we're at least a week ahead on a lot of these things, right? With the passive
Yeah.
PK and wanting to see the power kill come back. And I think we do see that with, maybe Yanni Gord, Brandon Tanev, even Jared McCann when they're out there. But whenever Stevenson's out there, and I'm not trying to necessarily talk negatively about him, I think this is something he's being instructed to do.
Yeah.
I don't think this is just him deciding to
Yeah.
collapse back into his own zone. But when you do see him out there, usually it's Tanev, they do just kind of collapse into the zone, which maybe it's the kind of thing that can work against the types of teams they played against more often than not, bad teams that don't have, because look, that Byfield play, you don't want to allow that to happen, but that is still a really good skill play from a skilled player.
Yeah.
Like that is a heck of a shot. The angle on that is crazy. I don't think there's anybody really on the Ducks or the Sharks. I mean, maybe they've got a couple guys who can burn you consistently with something like that. But if you're going to face better teams going forward, it's just not going to work. They're going to do a lot with that time and space.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's some teams like, maybe a Troy Terry or a Tyler Toffoli for these next two teams, right? Like, but it's like one guy. And so you can maybe cheat out if it's the one guy. But when you start going up against better teams where they have multiple guys, then it starts becoming really iffy when you're going to be that passive on the penalty kill. Again, you're kind of middle of the row. You're just a hair below average. So it's not like it totally needs to be addressed the way the power play probably needs to be addressed and figured out. But it is something that it feels like we've seen a little too many goals come in that situation from them. And it seems to be a common thread as to how those goals are scored against. Anything else you want to talk about on the special teams here before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's just about it. But I do have the update from Morning Skate.
All right.
Courtesy of Tim Booth, who is in Anaheim at the Morning Skate. So Philip Grubauer and Ben Byers both staying out late to get some work. So it looks like Joey's starting tonight, which that makes sense. But also Shane Wright should be back in the lineup tonight against Anaheim. I would be shocked if that wasn't the case. I was really expecting him to come back in and play. So it's going to be a very important game for Shane Wright for the Kraken, and we'll see what he does. Nothing on here about line rushes, but the fact that Myers is out maybe leads me to believe he might just take that spot, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, usually that would mean that Myers is the scratch and Shane's in. So hopefully we see that tonight, RJ, and hopefully Shane comes out re-energized, playing the way that he played earlier in the season, and we get to see some good Shane Wright stuff, and we don't ever have to talk about this stuff again. That would be nice.
Yep. Hopefully we could 2 podcasts in a row. Let's just leave it in the past.
Exactly. Want to thank everybody so much for joining us here today on the Deep Dive. Want to thank Queen Anne Beer Hall one more time. It's a wonderful place to go and watch any sport, not just hockey, but especially NFL Sundays. Oh, it is just a lot of fun to be surrounded by that many sports fans, have that much good food, great selection of beers if you're into that sort of thing, which a lot of sports fans are, so it's a good one for that. But yeah, definitely, if you haven't already and you've heard us talk about Queen Anne Beer Hall this much, you have to go. You're legally obligated now, potentially, to go.
Yes, there we go. That's way to close it out there. Seriously though, you'll be glad that you were legally obligated maybe to go.
Yes, exactly. Gotta love probably and maybe doing a lot of work there. All right, everybody, thanks so much for listening, and we will see you all next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.